Hello everybody, welcome back. So this section is about making a contribution to Egeria. So I'm going to walk through the process and then demonstrate the process of making a contribution, and you can choose to follow along as I do the contribution, or sit back and watch and then make the contribution yourself. Now we're going to do a very simple contribution, so you're not worrying about compiling and testing and things like that. We're going to focus very much on adding a documentation file, a Markdown file, and I've created a new directory called Egeria Dojo Postcards, and the idea is that you will add your own README file into that directory, which basically is a message to the Egeria team, or a little bit about your experiences with the dojo. And then link that file to the README, the top level README. So you'll do linking and actually adding a new file. And then we will go through the process of taking your file and bringing it into Egeria's master. And we had a discussion as to whether we would do this in a dummy repository or in the real one, but it's a lot more instructive to work with the live system, because then you've done it for real. As you go through it, because the process of actually getting the contribution in is more complex, because we have a lot of things running, validating any new incoming contribution before it can get into master. So basically, at a high level, for all developers, it's not so important when you're doing documentation, but there is a developer guideline that talks about the things that developers need to know about the type of, the levels of things like Java. License files, licensing is very important. So every single file needs an Apache 2.0 license. And if it's documentation, it also needs that's unfortunate, that shows that in not in its raw form, but it also has to have a copyright statement as well, and that protects the content. It basically ensures that people know that they can use the content. They should really attribute it to its original source, but it is free and open to use. So we have different licenses for the different types of files, so that you let's not do that. I can't show it. So that you can use that when you're creating new files. And the other thing we have is at the top of any file. Let's look at a file. You see here, this thing here, this Spdx license identifier. So Spdx is a special macro that is able to convert this symbol here into the license content. And that's how we, rather than having a big page of license information in every single file, we just use this little tag to incorporate the license. And then here's the copyright statement, both at the top and the bottom. So that's in the developer resources, explaining how to do all that, and how we use Markdown files, Javadoc, FFDC, which is first failure data capture. So when you were having problems yesterday, the error messages were coming out and you were getting a rich set of descriptions on exactly what was going wrong. And this is first failure data capture. So we try to make sure that every error that we get out of the system gives us a unique pointer back to the bit of code that failed and why it failed. We're not universally successful at it. It's more of an aspiration than a fact, but it is something that it's something that you constantly learn and improve on. It's a bit like quality, but that is our aim of the process. We talked before about the fact that we must be very, very clean on our dependencies, and so this is why there's focus here. When it comes to code style and layout, every module has an owner, and that owner chooses the coding style and layout for that module. So when you're going in to change someone else's module, make sure that you follow the style that's there. It's got to be, you know, whatever the style is, it should be consistent, clear, easy to use. Try not to use sort of one letter variable names, try to give them good names, because these files are going to be read by many more people than the original writer. So that's one of the reasons why we try to make our code very clear for somebody coming in. Testing, we have unit tests that go into the build, as well as we have FET tests and the labs as well. The labs provide us with the more system test-like environments to run things, and we have the conformance test, which we'll show you as well later on today. And one of the things that we have sort of in our wish list is to actually build a fully automated system test environment, so very similar to the lab environment, but is actually automatically driving everything so that we can be running that system test, you know, daily or weekly once we get it fully automated. So that's not in place at the moment, but that's something that we're aspiring to going forward. Everything around our everything that's going on in Egeria, we use GitHub issues to manage the process, and you'll get to do that today. And again, the samples that we talked about, they're created according to this particular process, which affects using the environment file you loaded, and also naming conventions for the collections themselves. So that's the developer guidelines, and feel free to have a look at them as you go. So the next thing we're going to do is actually start work. So you have to be logged on to GitHub to do anything. You can't make a contribution, because basically your ID is going to be associated with any contribution you make. Again, it's free. You can sign up and create your username. You're going to need to remember what it is in a little while, but basically once you've got your ID, when you go on to GitHub, tab, and you're logged in, your profile, your picture and your profile is listed off of here. So that's how you know you're logged in. And then the next thing you do is you create an issue. Now I've actually created an issue because I needed it for the screen captures. But there we go through. Where did I put it? Create my postcard file. So this was the issue I created for doing this particular piece of work. And you can see it has a title, which is create my postcard file. And it has a small description of what's this contribution about. And you can use Markdown in the description. So some of our discussions are actually quite long, and they include cut and paste from the console file and all sorts of things. So there's lots of things that that you can do in the issue to describe what's going on. So you create a new issue by pressing this button here. You get an empty thing, fill some stuff in, and then hit submit new button. It's a submit new issue button, which I'm not going to do because I've already got one. Now, when you've created it, you're going to get this number here, and that's another thing that you need to write down over and above your ID to do this next piece. So I'm just writing down now. Once you have your issue, let's go back to where's my page gone? Is that it? Yeah. So once you've created your issue, what we're going to do is go onto the command line and create something called a fork, and then create a clone. And this is to create an environment for you to be able to work with the code, but also create linkage back to the original GitHub repository, so that when you submit it, GitHub or Git can actually match back what you've changed with what was there originally. So that's the whole purpose of this. And it's done in 2 phases. And so the reason that we do this is that the Egeria repositories, all the Git repositories, are locked and are only writable updatable by the Egeria maintainer. So that's one of the things that you get awarded when you become a maintainer, is write access to the repository. Nevertheless, even as a maintainer, we always operate in this mode in case we make a mistake. So the purpose is that you make all your changes on a copy in your own repository, and then you bring it back. So the first stage is to create your copy. So what we're going to do is create something called a fork. And if I go back to GitHub, the fork is this button here. And this was what we celebrated earlier on. So you're going to press that button. And then when you go to your account, your repositories, you're going to see these are all the different repositories that I forked over time. And then this is my copy. So you see it says Mandy Chessel / Egeria. So this is my copy and this is my fork of Egeria. And all my development goes in through here before it's staged into here. And then we bring it into Egeria. So the first stage is click on that fork button, and you create your fork. I'm not going to do it because I've already got one. Then once you've got the fork, you then create a clone. So this is bringing the copy of your fork onto your machine so that you can edit it effectively. So we call this a clone. The way you do that, let me put that to one side. And this is a command window. It's an empty directory. And what I'm going to do is issue a command. Let's see if I can find it. See, I did this earlier on just to make sure that all the commands were there. So the command is, let's see if we can make this a bit wider so you can see it, is git clone, the name of the repository, but it's the name of your repository. So this is my GitHub ID. And so you would replace that with your GitHub ID. So it's going to connect up to GitHub and then pull a copy of Egeria from your repository, from your fork, down onto your machine. And because of course it's being watched, it's taking its time, but normally it's a little bit faster than this. There we are, nearly there. So that's created a copy, but now I need to connect it back to where it originally came from. And the next command is, if I can find it, where's it gone? It's called remote add upstream. So what we're saying is that this repository here, this clone, is also connected to the original object. So we're saying that this is the thing I cloned from, and this is the origin of the thing I cloned. That's what the second command is doing. Git remote add upstream, and you'll see the word upstream appear in other commands later on. And then this is the URL of the ODPI version. So this is the real Egeria repository. So do that. Oops. Yeah, this is quite good because I do this every single time. Actually, what you need to do next is to, let me do this properly. If we do an ls, you'll see that the clone command created a directory called Egeria. And you actually have to go into Egeria. I don't think I've ever done this without making this mistake. And there is the repository that's come down, and that's where it's from that directory that you do the git remote add upstream. So see, that's the value of a live demo, because you get to see what what you've done wrong. So that is this is my normal stream of actually creating of creating a clone, because I always make that mistake every single time. So, sorry, Nigel, do you want to say something?
I was just going to say, and you can run a git remote -v to just show what repositories you've got set up, or what connections you've got set up, which is quite nice, just so you feel comfortable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so yes, and here you can see that when we talk to origin, we're going to talk to my repository, to my fork, and when we talk to upstream, we're talking back to the real repository. And that's what that command did. So thank you, Nigel. That's a good suggestion. Okay, so that's basically, this is where we are now. We've got the clone now down on the machine. And here you'll see exactly those instructions, and you can see the CD there, which I forgot. Now, the thing that, if you're using Windows, there is an additional step, because as you probably guessed, we have very long path names, and that's not native for Windows. So there's a special command that you need to issue for Windows at this point, which I'm not going to do because I'm on Mac. So just don't forget that. What will happen is that I think the build fails. Is that right, Nigel? If you don't do this,
what will happen is the Git clone will fail, and you'll end up with a mess. It does actually say files because the path names are too long.
Okay. All right. So this is in the wrong place. Then does this need to go?
It should be before the clone. Yes.
Okay. All right. I'll fix that.
There is also another possible problem with long path names, but we've only ever seen it once or twice. You would just Google for long path names in Windows. You need to enable them, but hopefully no one will see that. I don't quite know the conditions under which it occurs, but the Git one is 100% of the time needed.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Okay, so I don't know if people are following along or whether I'm okay to continue. Nobody screams, so we're going to carry on and do the next bit. So the next bit is that many of us are often working on multiple changes at any one time. So a branch is a sort of like a little workspace that you can create in your clone to do a particular piece of work. And then when that piece of work is completed, that all of those changes are collected together and they're added to the repository. So if you're creating new interfaces and calling them, then the two pieces, the one that relies on the other, all comes into GitHub at the same time. So that's that. So, and we call these branches. And so what I'm going to show you is the process of actually creating a branch. So at this stage, we're completely in sync with what's happening in master, but it's always a good idea to actually just make sure that you're completely synced with everything. So let me go to.
Sorry, can I add one other thing, which is if people haven't used Git before, you may need, and haven't done any contributions, you may have to configure your username and email. If you don't do that, we won't be able to push updates later. I don't know if that's covered in the instructions, but that's the Git config commands for two global settings, user.name and user.email. And the email becomes quite relevant because that's how your contributions are matched to your GitHub ID, and that's how you get credits on GitHub. And in IBM's case, that's how IBM sees that you've done credit to open source. So they're two quite important settings. So certainly the email one is.
Yeah. So actually, when you certainly on Mac, the first time you issue a Git command that goes remote, it will actually ask you for your user ID and password, and then it will save those things. So it should happen. You should be prompted for it when it goes through.
One thing I would though definitely emphasize that when you do enter your email, it should be an email that GitHub knows about. And on GitHub, you can add email aliases, so you can use multiple ones, but make sure the one that you use for contributions matches one of those so that GitHub knows that it's you that's made these changes so that you get credit for them.
Yeah, I think we need to make sure that that's in the instructions too. It's a good point.
We had a few of our team, I think, that missed that initially.
Yeah, which was a shame because their work didn't get credited. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just sync with master. So I'm going to start by going to the master branch, which is the top level branch, and then this next command, pull upstream master. See if we can find it. That is basically going to upstream, which is the Egeria, the ODPI Egeria, the real Egeria repository, and pulling everything that's in master. So if during the time I created the clone and now this will give me all the changes. And actually, something happened in between the two, which is great. So I've now got absolutely everything. I'm completely up to date. And now I'm going to push that up to my fork, which is this final push. Oops, this is why I don't type it in while I'm demoing. Let's git push. So that's pushing from my local clone up to my fork. There we are. That's good. So now I'm in sync. I'm now going to do, I'm going to create my branch, and that's done with a checkout command, another checkout command, but I'm going to supply it with the name of my own fork. So here, what we're saying is checkout -b means it's a new branch. This is the name of my branch. You can have any name you like. And then the base of it is master. So I'm building a branch underneath the top level master. And I'm now inside my branch. And now I want my branch to be recognized. So up in GitHub. So that is, I'm not going to be able to type that while I'm talking. So push origin. So that is pushing the definition of the branch to origin, which is my fork. So that means my fork now knows about my new branch. And there we go. So that's good. So now I have a branch, and we've done the remote -v. That's fine. So we're all ready to go. We're all ready to go. Let's go back to here. And where we are in the process is that we're now at the bottom of this particular piece. We have, if I show you, we have a complete copy of Egeria on our local disk, and you can play with it from here. But what I'm going to do is go into IntelliJ and take this and actually load this copy into IntelliJ. So the way you do that is you start with the file menu and you go to open. So there's lots of things about creating new projects. You don't need to do that because we already have a project basically. And so you open, and this is in Dojo, and here is Egeria. So this is my clone in the Dojo file, and then you simply open it, and IntelliJ does everything else. So what it's doing, and it's going to take a little while, is it goes through all the POM files, looks at the structure of the project itself, and I think it starts building it too. So this process will take a little while as it starts to understand the project. There we are, almost done. At the moment, it's saying at the bottom that it's indexing. But I think when I open this, what you can see is these are highlighted, which means it recognizes them as modules. And the other thing you'll see, I can move the chat window out there, is if I click on the sidebar here, Maven, here you can see the modules. And so they've all been catalogued and ready to go in the project. And I think we're done. So at this stage, we have, let's go back to here. We now have everything that we need to continue. So the next thing to do, which will take a little while, is that we would normally build the whole of Egeria. And so that is done, to be sure, is this top plate. This is Maven clean install, which we've done before. Oops, you have to spell it right there. That's the only thing. There we are. And when I hit return, it starts to run the build. And this build, So the way that IntelliJ works is it has lots of panels. So this is the run panel showing, and it's starting to read the reading the POM, and I'm working down through configuring all the modules. And the nice thing is it puts out warnings and things. So we're always trying to eliminate warnings from the project. And this is actually a very clear way of seeing everything that's going on, because if you just watch the build, the console file is massive and there's lots of stuff coming out, but IntelliJ produces a very nice list of all the things to work on once the build is discovered, once the build is completed. So I will leave that, but I probably will ignore it. We'll shut it down once we get going. Right. So now we're going to make a change, and there's so many different ways that you could be doing this. But in this particular case, we are going to add that file to the tutorials. So here's the postcard file. This is the directory that we're going to add. And this is the README file that we're going to extend. Let's get rid of that, it's taking up too much space. So the first thing we do is we create the file. And the new command has a number of options there already. But you'll see I have an option called Readme Markdown. And because of the fact we have to put licenses into the file, one thing you can do with IntelliJ, I think it's in here, is you can set up lots of different templates. And one of them is the file and code templates. So what I've done is the ones in blue are the ones I've edited. I've actually edited the class file and put the license files for classes in there. So every time I create a new class, it's already got the right copyright statement in there. Actually, it's not quite right. It's right now. And same for interface. Just changed our style to say we should put the year in as well. So I'll just fix that in my machine. Things like package information, you can set the header, and I've created my own entry in here for Readme Markdown, which means that when I create a file using this menu option, it has all the license information in. So you can choose to do that, or you can do your own, you can actually put it in yourself manually each time. But when I create it, so you select the directory, create a Readme Markdown file, think about its title. I don't know. I haven't really thought about this. So that's my new file name. And now, because IntelliJ understands about Git, it says, do you want to add the file to Git? I always say no, because I like to control what's added to the project myself, because you might create a file, delete it, or have temporary files coming in, and you don't want them to be automatically added. So I always say no, don't add it to Git. Oh. So now I've got my new file. It's come up here. You can see the name of the file. Doesn't matter, when you're doing this yourself, put whatever text you like into the center of this file. It's just to give you an opportunity to, to create something. It can be as much or as little as possible, as you like, sorry. And then just add to the list of postcards. So when we do a link, we use the square brackets to say, and this is the text that appears on the screen. And you can see it's telling me when I've got spelling mistakes, which is extremely important. and then it will auto-complete on the file. So in the brackets is the actual name of the file that you're going to be adding. So there's my change. Everything's being automatically saved, so it's already gone to the disk. And in a normal, if I was making code changes, I would do a complete build and do the testing, which we'll talk about in a little while. But for this particular change, I'm just going to go straight through to put it up into master, and then we'll talk about the actual code changes and testing in a little while. But I thought it would be useful just to take it right the way through the process as we're going. So that's my change. You're going to be making changes in parallel in your own environment. Let's go back to the page. So I've made the change, assuming I now go into a process of testing it, but I'm going to be bad and not do that at the moment. And now I'm going to actually bring the changes. Firstly, they go into my clone, then they go into my fork, and then they go from the fork back into Egeria. So that's the process that we're going through. So let's go to the thing, add and commit changes. So as I say, we need to be bringing our changes up into Egeria. So let me go to, I'm going back to the command line, the command window. Now, if I do something called Git Status, what you'll see is a list of the files that I changed. So I added a new file from Mandy Chessel, and I modified the Readme file. So those are the two things I changed, and that's actually what I expected to come up, so that's always a good sign. So the next thing to do is I need to add them to my clone. And that first add can either be done from IntelliJ or from the command line. And I tend to do it from IntelliJ, but that's just a matter of taste. So from the let's close it up. From here, go to, where is it called? Oh, I know why that's not showing that, because that's my normal development environment. Let's get rid of that. This is the one we needed. This is the one that I'm working through in the demo. So to actually add, to Git from IntelliJ, there's a Git menu, and you type add. And so now when I go back to my command window and I say Git Status, what it now tells me is that these two files are in the clone, ready to go up, ready to be what we call committed, which means that they are a change that is complete and ready to be brought into the main repository. And so we do that with the Git -s. Now the -s is very important because that is signing it to say that this is my work, and I'm happy to give the rights to ODPI to own this piece of work going forward. This is the DCO. So basically, I'm agreeing to the DCO as I do this. And this, you can either supply a message that describes the change in the command line, or the VI editor comes up with an opportunity for you to put a comment. The other thing is, you can see this is what the -s added. This is basically saying I did this, and I'm allowed to give this to the ODPI. So this sort of thing we put in a commit message. So I press the I button to go into insert if you're not a VI person, and I will say something like new post card from Dojo demo. And then the next thing you do is you say what was the issue that this change is related to. so that we can track. If we're looking at the issue, we can see all the commits that are assigned to it. And that's really important where there are a number of things that need to be done before that issue is fully resolved. So mine was 3091. And that means I've now described the change and the issue it's associated with. I'm going to hit escape, take me out of edit mode, and then WQ writes the change. So I now have committed my content to the clone. The next step is to push it to origin, which is my fork, up on GitHub. That's not going to work, is it? It's a git push. Now this is good. So normally you just type git push, but the very first time you type push in a new branch, you have to type a slightly longer command. And the nice thing about Git is it knows that you're always going to forget, and it puts out the thing you should have typed. Oops, you should have typed on the screen so that you can just cut and paste and do the right command, which is good, except for the fact I don't know why it just doesn't issue itself. But anyhow, that is now connecting up and connecting my branch both to well, it's pushing stuff up to the branch, up to the fork, and connecting that change with the upstream master as well. So that is now up on GitHub. So the other
actually, just to clarify, so at this point there is actually no connection with the ODPI upstream.
Was it not? What's this?
No, the upstream. If you imagine you've got a set of tiers, what you're doing is you're taking it from what's on your local disk to push it to the upstream location, which is called origin, which isn't what we call upstream. So it's taken it to the next level. So everything you've done at this point, other than the reference to the issue, is not affecting the code in any way that's in Egeria, because you don't have access to that until you create the pull request.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah. Okay. So let me go back to the screen. So this is what we've been doing here, and this is the actual push. Now, the other thing that we often do is just to go through that cycle of pulling from the Egeria master, just in case someone else has done something. And in fact, generally, people have done something all the time. So we do a git pull upstream master. Oh, that's good. No one's done anything. It's all listening to me. Git push. And then push that up to my fork. Everything was great. So when you look at this here, so this is, Nigel did these, so you can see he uses the command line, whereas I tend to use VI. Here's the pull upstream master. And that's, as I say, that's doing this asynchronous thing, or this asymmetrical. So everything is pretty symmetrical apart from this, where we're constantly saying, get the latest code, which is good. And so now we're ready to do what's called the pull request, or PR. You hear people talk about PRs all the time. So you go back to GitHub. Let's create a new tab and go to GitHub, and the pull requests PRs are here listed down. Now you can see the nice thing is that when you're ready to do it, because GitHub's smart, it knows that you've made a change and you're ready to go, and so it says, do you want to create a pull request? And it's like, yeah, let's create a pull request. Now, sometimes that message doesn't come up. I've no idea why it doesn't, in which case you go to your repositories, click down to get to the place where you can see your branches, and then you do the pull request from there. But most of the time it comes up with a message here, and this is how I do it. So you can see that it's also pre-populated it. So that was the commit message I put in. and you can see it's tied back to the issue, and then you can see my signing. I can go in here and I can add extra information. Just so that people know what I'm doing. And then, oh, the other thing is you can see this is the change I made as well. So you can also double check that you've not done something you didn't intend to do, which is again really important. And then we create the pull request, and that, as a contributor, is actually you're now waiting for a maintainer to come along and look at your change and approve it. The other thing that's happening is that what you can see here is a whole series of automated processes. So the first thing it does is it's check that you've signed all your commits, and we can't accept anything that isn't properly signed. So this is part of our governance process. So it doesn't matter whether you're a maintainer or not, that rule is totally required. And then there's two other things that happen is that a Maven clean install is done both on using the Java 8 compiler and the Java 11. And we do this because although 8 is our default, we want to make sure that we're future-proofing our code, and we don't do anything, we don't use anything that's been deprecated in 11. So it means people then have a choice of which level of Java. And this is again because the code is being embedded in different technologies, and we want to make sure that we reach the largest number of consumers. So that's why we do both. And so while this build is happening, the maintainers will be looking at the pull request. They'll be looking at the changes that I've made, the commits that I've made, and then they'll be having a conversation with me. So Nigel, I don't know whether you want to put a review in.
Yes, I could do a little review of it. And this is actually one of the really nice features with GitHub. It's good to have that conversation. Although if it's very broad issues, always good to write that up in, or very broad discussion, always good to write that up in the issue first. So before spending lots of time writing the code, explore the area in an issue. Right, I'm just going to pull requests. Creating new postcard.
Yeah, well, I just here you can see because I put the name of the issue in. Actually, there's the hover text, but also it's a clickable link. So the maintainers can come in and say, "Oh, okay, what was all this about?" And then they could go and read what you wrote in the issue as well. And again, this is all about the more you help the maintainers, the faster they'll process your pull request. So that's really what it's about. And this view here is called this is the conversation view, and so it will show all the changes. So here we are. We've got so I'm not sure. Surely I know. And so here we've got Nigel. He's come in and he's requested changes to it. I'm not sure what to do there, but anyhow, let me go and change the code and make a change. So I'm going back into IntelliJ. Let's do this. Let's correct the grammar. Maybe that's better. And now because I've made a change to my file, I need to go back through. IntelliJ just had a little funny 5 minutes there. Git add back to my command. And again, if this was code, we would be also testing in between. I'm adding in a commit. Let's say fix review point. And again, I'm going to put in the issue number. And do the git push. That's good. And git pull upstream just to check. That's all okay. And we're ready to go again. Now, I don't create a pull request. What has actually happened is, let's refresh this. What should actually happen now is you see that there are now 2 commits in this pull request, which is my original changes and the ones I've done to hopefully fix. Oh, somebody else is busily working on their own, which is great. I think now have you approved it? Yes, you've approved it. So I've got green ticks, and I'm ready to go. So thank you, Nigel. But we still have to wait for the build. And this is one of our the bottlenecks that we have in our process is that that we have to wait for the build to finish before we can commit it. We can merge it into the master, but also the moment that one goes in, everyone else is invalidated and they will have to start again. So when we have a lot of pull requests coming in, you'll see the maintainers picking one and trying to get them in. And if you have 2 maintainers fighting one another, then then we can get delays in actually bringing the pull requests in. But now, as I say, what will happen is eventually when the 2 builds, the 8 and the 11 build complete, then we can merge the pull request. So while we're waiting, and Nigel, any suggestions or other things?
A few other things, I guess. When you're doing the pull request, you can actually type fixes and then hash and the issue number. Wouldn't suggest you do it here because we've got multiple PRs for a single issue. But if you've just got a single PR and you're pretty sure that completes the issue, if you type fixes #3091 when you create the PR, then it means that once this is merged, the issue will automatically be closed as well. So there's quite a lot of cross-linking of this sort of hash and the issue number or the PR number. And in fact, when you're raising issues and talking about things, it's good to use that as part of the text that you type because it helps to stitch that together if people are looking at things. That's one thing. Another thing, when you create the PR, there is a possibility of creating a draft PR. If you don't think it's quite ready, but you want review comments on it, that's possible. There's a little drop down next to the create PR when you had that green button. The other thing you can do is if you do have a build error, if you click on the actual checks, Mandy, if you click on details of one of them, and then you click on view more details in Azure pipelines.
This one?
Which is in the center section. Yes, it's either one. Select the view more details in Azure pipelines just there. No, to the right.
Sorry.
In the main pane.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, got it.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
And if you then click either the Java 11 or the Java 8, you can actually go and see the output from the build. So if you've broken the build in some way by your change, you can scroll to the bottom and see what the cause was.
It's not got very far at all. It's got a little bit more to do.
No, it takes pretty much about half an hour to get through these.
Yeah. Okay, so that's a demonstration of going through to the pull request. If you'd like to have a go yourself, I can see somebody is already, so we've already got another pull request going through, which is great. And you can always see see where we are and how much is going through by the by this list, the pull request list, which is off the top of the contribution. Any comments or questions?
Anyone else going to try for a pull request? Just say yes, pull request in the chat, please, just so we know. Anyone else going to try? Okay.
Good.
Okay.
It's quite interesting when you going through this, because we type those commands all the time. It's just a bit it's very automatic, but actually sitting down and documenting exactly what's happening at each stage is quite interesting.
It's interesting because I don't use IntelliJ for the Git commands. I do it all on the command line. I guess people have different approaches.
Yeah, the only reason I do the add from IntelliJ is I don't like typing the wrong name of the file.
So git add dot adds everything you've changed.
Okay.
Relevant to your current directory.
Yes. Yes.
So it doesn't change things in parents, and the number of times I've been stuck that.
Yeah. And it's funny because you always you get your own little way of doing things. You know, or I know this path works, and it's not necessarily the most efficient way of doing it, but it's just you know what you've come to know. You know, your special incantation.
Yes.
Now, what you can see on here is you've got little orange dots, and that means that it's running stuff, and the ticks means that it's actually ready to go. We do need to process those. Egeria sent us an email to say that it's taking too long. But yeah, that's the process, and I don't think we've got very much more to.
I noticed that one PR that's in there, it's an empty file, so I don't know if you meant to put content in, but I added that comment.
This one? This
The
one,
top one, yes, that's right.
Okay. We've got change new file. Yeah. So this one probably should be fixed. Just go back in, add some content. So like, for example, the file will need, so if I do a review, and I do request changes, make, oops, has nice, now we can see the review come through on this one. But it's nicely signed off. That's good. So the thing to do is to go back and add the license information to your Markdown, connect it up to the Readme, the top level Readme, and then go through, add, commit, push, pull.
So what's the plan now?
So let me go back to the what's happened to my. So we're going to talk a little bit about, I'm going to give people a bit of time to finish that off. So we give them another half an hour to get the pull request done. Then we're going to talk a little bit about testing, which I skipped to go through this. And Nigel, you wanted to talk about testing in containers. I have no material for that. So if you want to talk about it afterwards, that's good. As I say, I haven't got anything documented.
Okay, I can give you a pointer as to how to rebuild the containers and how I do that. It's probably an area we've got a bit more work to do on to make it nice and smooth. But I'm happy to just show people how to build those containers for testing if that helps.
Yes, yes.
So are we taking a 30-minute pause now?
Well, Nigel and I are, but I think other people are working. So let's. I've got a question here coming up, which is where are the license information? And they're in the developer resources, license example files, and there's one for the markdowns, which is here. So let me I'm just going to put the text. Yeah. See if that works. Oh, no, that looks a real mess. Oh no, that's sort of there. So that's the text I've just put into the chat. That's the license for the markdown file. So then the next question is from Shahir about what page are we on? So we are working through this particular page, which I'm going to put the link in the chat as well. Yeah, this is the page we're working from. And we've been working our way through the steps to contribute to Egeria. This picture up here. So yeah, in half an hour we'll start again and we'll talk about testing.
So at 10, so you'll be around, but people can work until 10:30 a.m. US Eastern, 3:30 p.m. UK.
Yeah.
Okay. And people can ask questions.
Yes, we will allow questions. Yes. So the question here is, how can our changes be committed to the origin repository of Egeria, not only to the clone? So what you're doing is basically you bring the commit into the local onto your local disk. That's the commit request, and then you say push, and that pushes it up to the fork. So that's what the push does. I think I'm using the wrong picture here. Let me go to that part of the picture. The picture's looking correct. Yeah, that's better. Yeah, so when you issue the push, it pushes it up to the fork. And then when you do the pull request takes it from, is requesting the code to move from your fork into the main Egeria repository. So it's commit into the clone, push up to the fork, and pull requests into the ODPI repository. Did I answer your question?
I guess the way I'd word the pull request as well is what you're really saying is to the Egeria project, I would like you to pull my change, and that's so it's the Egeria project going out and pulling in that stuff from your fork to be incorporated within Egeria, and that's at the discretion of the maintainers, which is why we have the pull request document that you create that says, could you look at this, please? And then the maintainers that look at it and go, yeah, that's great, we'll pull in your code change.